Ooh, I got a tailwind coming in the last quarter mile.
Oh, that's
Morning on our property on Sunland.
really?
That one big cottonwood that's right on the side of the road there, right just past the houses.
Oops. Was that?
I don't know what that was. It sounded like what Walt said just a minute ago.
No,
We talked about your tailwind.
that might have been.
One on Sunland. Sunland, which part?
So, just past the houses that are on the east side of the street there.
Ye-
Before Mandage, so between.
Oh, yeah.
There's a big cottonwood tree right.
Wow.
Kind of splits into two and blew one of them over this morning.
I mean, are in the street or
No, it was
Property.
So our Dave Jarvis can cut it up. He leases it from us.
I'm gonna go.
Morning, Michelle.
Morning.
Are we ready to go?
I think so.
Okay. Let's see, we have everyone here that needs to be. Well, good morning. I'd like to call to order the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority Board of Directors meeting this April 19th, 2022. The time is 8:01. As an administrative matter, and notice to the public, this meeting is being conducted in a sort of a hybrid manner, which will be both in person and via Zoom. And Michelle, do we have some participants via Zoom? That would be Jen and Ward, is that correct?
Yes, Ward is on. And Jennifer Kraftcheck is on.
Okay, very good, thank you. At this time, there are no other members of the public present, but as another administrative matter, public comments may be made either in person, via Zoom, or in writing. So at this time, also this meeting is being conducted in compliance with California state regulations pertinent to the pandemic and so forth. So at this time, I'd like to call to order formally the meeting. First item on the agenda is Pledge of the Allegiance. And Ron Stone, would you please do us the honors?
I'd be happy to. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, would you please take the roll?
Board Member Schwartz? Here. Board Member Stone?
Here.
Chairman Mahovey?
Here.
Chairman Pachuki?
Here. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Michelle, were any comments submitted in writing?
No public comments were received.
No public comments, and there are no members of the public present via Zoom. We have, then we can move on to agenda item number 5, and this is under notice to the public. All matters under the consent calendar are considered routine by the authority and will be acted on by one motion. The item that we have before us today is the approval or filing of the Board of Directors of the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority meeting minutes of January 18th, 2022. Do we have any comments, discussion, or a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar as is.
We have a motion.
I'll
and-
second.
We have a motion and a second. Ron?
I have to abstain only because I had an electronic problem in that meeting. I may have missed some of the issues, so.
That's fine. Thank you. Michelle, at this point, procedurally, do you poll the board or what is the procedure?
Check for public comment and then you call for the vote.
Yes.
Okay,
No public comments were received on the minutes. And so I will take roll call for the approval.
thank you.
Board Member Schwartz?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mahovey?
Yes.
Chairman Pachuki?
Yes.
Motion approved. for the Board of Directors of the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority meeting minutes from January 18, 2022.
Thank you. New business. Excuse me. Proposed budget discussion. Who would like to take the lead on this item?
That's
I
a
don't know.
definite no, I think.
Ward looks very pained.
Ward, can you hear me?
He's muted.
I can
though.
hear you
I
now.
didn't think he could at first without this microphone working.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about the pain look.
Yeah, that somehow needs to get to this system too. So Ward, if we, as we did last year, we had a proposed budget meeting today and then adopted the budget in June. Would it be in the future, if we proposed a budget at this meeting and then had changes to make to it today, could we still adopt that budget today, or do we have to do it as a separate meeting going forward?
No,
Because
you
we
could
did
do
not.
it.
We did not put it down as approval today, but go in the coming years.
Yes, you could do that.
Okay, so maybe saving a meeting in the future. And I apologize, I didn't think of that till just now. So the proposed budget we gave to you, and also Michelle was good enough to put together our costs that we did spend this last year. And as you can see, most of it was just what we thought, consulting, legal, and really that was all the costs we had. I think in this next budget cycle, we need to get on our track, I think, of doing the monitoring wells together rather than independently like we've been doing. And we talked about it and it just didn't happen this year, but we essentially are kind of doing it together, but more in the sense of doing them together as in the city's doing, what is it, 9 and, or I can't remember, it's 9 or 8 or 9 and the district's doing 4 or 5. So we do them evenly and split everything evenly. I think that's the way we should be doing that going forward. As well as the monthly nitrogen, which is pretty much an influent and an effluent for both plants. So whether we do them together or not, it's the same cost for everybody. We left in some money for grant writing just in case. We didn't spend any of that this year. GIS support, Mike Hay has produced documents for consultants and such off of our GIS. He's just so efficient. I don't even know, did we even, I can't remember. I don't think we even had any expense with him last year. So he obviously didn't even charge us for it when he did it.
It might be just under other, but like you said, I don't see it
Yeah,
listed as the vendor, so.
explicitly
possibly
listed.
not. Mhm.
And then so again, and then we'll have consultant fees, which just to clarify that, we had consultant fees obviously last year with Lumos on, now I'm drawing a blank of what he did for us. He did, the Title 22 engineering and all that. And then this year again, we'll have the feasibility study. And that feasibility study will be, Jonathan will be looking at up to 3 types of tertiary treatment plants, oxidation ditch, activated sludge, and then come back to us with his proposal of what are which 3 he recommends we go with for you all to be able to decide the direction we want to go with in design. So that cost will be there. And then he's also still finishing up our plant. What's the word I want to use for it? It was essentially a new update to Lahontan on all of our plants and how they operate, all that stuff that they're requiring with our current discharge permit. And Jonathan, I think, is nearly done with that. I think both Walt and I have spoke to him independently. He's, as everybody is, overburdened with work. So he's cranking through things as fast as he can. But this one, obviously, I told him, I said, you're all right. You don't have to drop everything to get us done. You know, designing a plant is a ways off. So fitted in accordingly. Then again, staff time, pretty self-explanatory. Discharge fees, again, until we start working on a new discharge permit, that we will not have that, but we keep hoping that we're going to get there. So we keep the money in there. And then irrigation and our projects. That's the one that's kind of carry into most of our discussion today. You know, that we had $1 million in there last year. And when the budget was updated through the Laurel Ag, it went to 3.1 million. You know, so we did not spend the $1 million, obviously. But, you know, that still turns out to be a giant question is, you know, are we going to, do we continue to move forward with that project? That we're probably funded in between the IRWIMP has about 400,000 to 500,000 for us. And which we're still, it's not official yet, but we've been through all the processes and our project staying in that funded project. But we also and then we also have NRCS money, and it was, now I'm trying to remember, it was not a huge amount, like $360,000. That is also based off a bigger project, and the smaller we make it, they just pay by how much pipe you put in the ground. So that funding will become whatever that amount less. We don't know that yet. And then still getting through the CEQA process. So we just, you know, those are essentially, I want to call them placeholders, at least the construction part of it. And we have to keep, you know, one thing that got away from me that may happen in the next fiscal year is the purchase of the land from DWP. If they keep saying Todd, and Todd may or may, he didn't know if he was going to make it today.
He's on here.
He's listening on his phone, I think. But they're out there actually on boots on the ground doing the appraisal right now. And it sounds like we're on schedule. The schedule was April or May of 2023 that they would bring us, you know, actually close escrow. So probably first part of the year, make the sale, and then escrow should close 3 to 4 months afterwards. You know, that's still an undefined number right now. You know, we have what we think it should be, but we don't know until they get done. It could be considerably less or more. We don't know. I think that the land acquisition, we don't want to pass up that opportunity to get that land at any cost. You know, whether we can build the construction, the irrigation project right away, but indefinitely, we're going to always need more land to discharge water on. And if the price is what we can afford, it would be, you know, it definitely behoove us to purchase that land. We'll probably never get another option if we don't.
Right.
Maybe more, you know, even if we reconfigure things and part of that land becomes a solar farm to power this new plant or something, but, you know, even if we can't build a giant irrigation project. So that's kind of it in a quick overview. So again, you know, you take out the 3 million, and there's really our working budget is, you know, a little about $100,000. And we only spent 62 last year. So very much the same kind of a budget.
So this next page are the actual expenditures, right?
Correct, yes.
Can I make a request for next year that when we have the proposed budget, we have the approved budget and the actual expenditures in the following column, and then the proposed for the next year?
Yes, absolutely. You'll make note of
keep
it.
track of that.
Make a
Yeah,
column.
yeah, and I think you're exactly right. We should have had what was proposed, what we spent, gone on and on and on. And I'll be honest with you, Michelle helped me out a lot. I got a lot going on right now. So she did her best to, you know, because we should have, in consultant fees, we should have had what we spent the money on last year, the exact calling out the project, and then the new project for the next year. And definitely apologize for that. but definitely noted, we'll make that change for next year.
Other comments, questions? Destin gave us a lot of information there and,
Yeah, sorry.
no, that's okay.
I
It's all-
kind of went through it all because it's all in my head.
It's all part of the briefing for us. Ron, do you have any thoughts or comments?
No, I like what you're talking about, Destin, getting the land at all costs. I think that's a prudent investment for both parties.
And so, I mean, given that the irrigation project, the price tag has gone up by a factor of 3, like if it continues doing that every year, in like 3 years, we could have built a new plant, right? So, do we want to modify the capital line to not necessarily tie it to construction? And would land acquisition, the DWP land acquisition, fall under a blanket irrigation project that we've been talking about? So we just set an amount in the budget that would cover at least the land acquisition and potentially doing something with the irrigation project, even though we're going to be discussing that more in a bit.
Yeah, maybe we keep, like you said, that placeholder there, but add an additional line as land acquisition under capital there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And maybe I will further figure that out here today, if how exactly that fits in. But yeah, I always hesitate. I'm not sure what number to put down for the land acquisition.
Right.
We think, I remember in the very beginning, it was 1,000 to 2,000 an acre is what they assumed. I don't know. We should know here pretty soon. I wish Todd, I have no idea once they finish their appraisal, how long it is before they actually put a value to it.
What are they using as comparables?
Exactly that.
There aren't any.
So when we originally started this process of how we were going to arrive at a price, we were hiring a third-party appraiser. There would be ground rules set by DWP, so that person would understand all the deed restrictions that may come with the property, the use of the property, so that, we were, because you're absolutely correct, there's no way to comp it with anything. And so we would hope that all those parameters would kind of set the tone for the cost of the property. And, obviously 85 of those acres have already had discharged wastewater on it. That definitely makes the value of that land something different because it's already, I don't want to call it contaminated, but
It is.
it's been polluted with wastewater. So it has a whole different value. But I'm assuming, if Todd can chime in, it'd be great. But I'm assuming that those same ground rules have been set with this new appraiser so they understand. And then once they get done, then we'll have the opportunity to negotiate that, essentially go back and forth of why we think it isn't or is worth whatever.
And excuse me, I missed that. Did you say we are hiring our own independent appraiser?
No, we were going to, that was part of the sale, but DWP decided, because it is such a different animal than they've ever dealt with or us, that they just went ahead and started doing it in-house.
Got it.
I think they actually hired a third-party appraiser.
Okay.
By their DWP rules, they had to do that. Which I will say thank you for, because I'm sure that was a $50,000
At least.
Yeah.
We want to ask for Todd's input at this point, since we're talking about.
His name, yeah.
appraisal.
Todd, are you there? He's probably texting me right now. Can't hear us or can't talk.
I see his name.
We could bring him in.
Unmuted. Yeah, he has to be unmuted.
Okay, he is. Let me put in. There's also a phone number, so let me,
He's on phone.
okay, perfect.
There we go. Can you hear me?
I think you can go now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. I apologize. Yeah, my computer is a microphone. So, yeah, the appraisal is in progress. Last Monday, I was on site with the appraiser. He was inspecting the property. Our survey crew has been out there and kind of marked some of the different corners at the intersections of Airport Road, Gus Cashbaugh, A drain, things like that, just so that they were familiar with what's going on. And we have done the appraisal, or the appraisal is in progress, like Dustin said, with an independent third party. Basically, we've contracted with someone to do that appraisal, and it's roughly 60 days, and they've been in it just about 2 weeks. So hopefully in another 6 weeks, if everything's on schedule, the appraisal then draft will be presented to us, and we'll have an idea of what we're looking at. But like Dustin said, there were, provisions that were made known to the appraiser. We're not transferring any water rights. The condition of the property with the environmental site assessment that was done on the portion that you're currently spreading on there, the former Tatum lease, et cetera. So they're aware of those different elements that are in play with the valuation.
Okay.
For like 6 weeks.
Sounds like so 6 weeks, Todd, they'll present you with an appraisal.
Roughly, yeah. If all goes well, that's the deadline. And at that point, we'll have the draft in hand and be able to see what the figures are, and if there's any concerns with the valuation technique or something like that. But that was all, pretty clearly laid out for the appraiser. So I'm not anticipating any problems with that.
So then how long do you think it'll be before we actually see that appraisal?
I would imagine we would need some time to review that. I don't know exactly how long. I'd have to run that by our property manager, Elsa Jimenez, but this is me thinking that probably we would need about a month or so to look over that and to make sure, all the parameters were met. Again, that we're comfortable with the way the valuation was done, comps, et cetera. But it is a draft. If there's things that need to be addressed, that allows time for that to be done. So that would be a factor that could make it take longer. But it's kind of, that once we get the draft, we'll kind of know where we're at and see if things need to be addressed, or, oh no, this is looking like you covered all the points and you addressed all the different issues that were noted and the different rights that were conveyed or not conveyed, et cetera. And we're good to go. So we'll know once we see it, but I'm fairly confident that we're not going to have issues with the appraisal, but you never know.
Sorry, go ahead.
Todd, after it's approved, internally, and then it's presented to us, what is the process like at that point?
That's just going through the internal processes that we have. We'd be preparing, board package for approval of the sale, putting together the sale contract, that we'd be executing with BAWA, and then presenting those documents to, like I said, to the board for approval. And that's always a process, sending packets to Los Angeles, going through the different steps there for approval. And then getting back to us. But it's at that point, once we have a value agreed upon price between DWP and BAWA, then it's just kind of going through the steps of executing the agreement and going through the board.
So, excuse me again. So once DWP has done the initial review, BAWA then confers with you, or how does that work?
I think we want to.
Yeah, we'll be reaching out. We'll be reaching out to BAWA because that's where we'll see what the appraised value is, and that's where we'll be able to have a value there for you to consider, and we'll make known to you what our appraiser come up with. I should say the appraiser.
Okay.
And we would need time to approve it too, and examine it, right?
I would think.
Yeah,
I hope so.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's not, hey, sign on the dotted line right now. You know how
Right.
things work with us. You'll have it done, and we'll be trying to get everything done here on our end in LA. So yeah, but there'll be plenty of time there to look at it, Ron, and to discuss everything. It's not going to be, we'll have a meeting at that point. We're not going to just send you over a document and say, hey, take it or leave it, but we can discuss all the different attributes there that would be any concerns to either party.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, thank you, Todd, for that answer.
Sure.
Other questions for Todd, since we got him?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're gonna be getting something in 6 weeks, and then you said it would be about a month for you guys to review it. That puts us already into the next fiscal year with the 6 weeks plus a month. Would you be willing to share like ballpark in 6 weeks of how much we should be planning on in our position here, or no?
I can't commit the department to that, but it like I said, it depends on the draft. If for some reason there were factors that weren't addressed or something like that, then that of course would be potentially affecting the value. That's why we need a chance just to review it. It would be like if you had contracted someone to prepare some plans, you want to run over those plans to make sure that everything was addressed for your project before you forward that. So we just need the time to do that. So again, I'm assuming and fairly confident that everything's going to be fine with the appraisal with the different items being addressed, but I don't know. But let's say that we get everything is running along on time and we have the draft in 6 weeks or so and have time to review it. If there are any issues that come up, we'd be able to communicate that with you to let you know that, it's going to take a little longer than we anticipate, but until we see the draft, I really can't say either way. But that's our whole goal, is to have that draft be sufficient, and then we can, have a appraisal report, prepare the official report versus a draft, and then we'd have that value in hand that we can be discussing with you. But I'm hoping, when the next.
From our standpoint, it seems, this budget, it seems like everything to me seems fine, except we still have a giant question mark to future capital. We have a giant question mark with regards to the DWP land acquisition. We have a question mark with regards to the irrigation project. So, but otherwise, this budget looks fine to me.
And Todd, just quickly doing the math going out. So you should probably see it at the end of May. Do you think that by the last week of June, you guys would have some comfort level with it, and we could have a ballpark number by, giving you guys a month to look at it, nearly a month? And then that would help us, it would drive our budget if we need to just put that number in capital, and everything else, is obviously taken out if that number is pretty big. I'm assuming it's going to be fairly large, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 800,000.
We don't want to give it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be safe to say, though, by the end of June, you may have enough time I'll give you a month to kind of look at everything?
Yeah, that's
and I'm not going to say I'm holding you to it.
No, I understand. That's what I'm assuming. If everything is fine, the contractor has the contractor appraiser has the report to us, the draft, and they're on time. Yeah, that seems to me like a month would be plenty of time for us to make sure we're comfortable with everything, and then could discuss that value with you. So that sounds reasonable to me. Again, but it kind of hinges upon them meeting their deadline. And when we have the appraisal to it, also we're working with our counterparts in Los Angeles, in the city, not just here locally, that is involved in the appraisal process with that person that we contracted. So we'll be working with them, and assuming everyone's on time and everything's good, that sounds to me like that should be fine with your timeline.
Any more questions for Todd? I think we have direction. We'll just finalize this in the end of June. Ward, remind me, and you may not remember either, do we have to have a budget completed on June 30th? Or I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
It does say that in the code section that by July 1st, you should be having a hearing on the budget. I'm going to, not, I think substantial compliance by your next meeting is fine with me. So it does say that the final budget needs to be adopted by the board on September 1st. So I think that's the main thing, is if you get the budget adopted by September 1st, I'm okay with having a hearing on the budget and a vote on the budget by July 19th.
That's kind of where I was going. We maybe don't need to have a special meeting. We can just do it at our first meeting in July, if the board's okay with that.
I am.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Ward.
Further comments, discussions, questions? Excellent presentation, Destin. And Todd, thank you very much for your input. It helps us understand process from your perspective. We're ready to move on to the second item under new business, which is staff and board to discuss Sequin NEPA irrigation project. Well, there's a lot here again for Destin to bring us up to speed on. So it's all yours, Destin.
So as the board knows, about a year ago, we started this CEQA process, and I guess we'll also bring that wasn't in here that we just learned. The NRCS has completed the NEPA process of this. So we went through, everything was well, I want to say it hasn't been easy since the beginning. The biological constraints had been completed. Then we got all the red flags from Lahontan. So we instructed Helix to give us a work order and a cost, or put together a work order and a cost to start cultural resources. Then again, red flags were brought up. So we kind of took a step back and trying to realize really, how are we going to get through this, or can we get through it, I guess is the question. So at that time, we made a call to team engineering, or team environmental now, excuse me, because they have a lot of local experience around here working with the tribes and stuff. So we want to get their take on what do they think the possible hurdles are to get through a cultural resources study down there, mostly Native American artifacts. They've been thinking about it for a long time. Not, at first they thought, oh, we could just do this. And then they just did a quick little look at the area, and they went, oh, maybe Robert is right. Maybe it is going to be, they do a pedestrian survey on a grid and walking it out there to find just surface artifacts. But there's so much grass and brush, and they really can't see what's out there, and especially forecast what may be found when you start digging out there. So they thought about it for quite a bit, and I met with them last week, and Walt happened to be there, so he listened in and was part of it. She brought another kind of a direction on how to start this, and in a sense, taking baby steps rather than just biting off this whole project, as in meeting with the tribe. First it'll start off with her and I walking around out there and showing her some stuff. And then they would go to the tribe, and I believe Monty Bengosha is their historic preservation officer, and work with Monty and try to see how big of a challenge we think this is going to be. And start, which is part of the AB, I can't remember, 54, I think, tribal consultation that has to be done through CEQA anyways. And that's also inviting the Big Pine tribe to be part of this, letting them know what we're doing, because they did stop the project in Big Pine down there. So her ideas and kind of what we brought to the table make a lot of sense. I have since put the archaeologists or whoever it was that worked for, I can't remember her exact title, but that completed the NEPA document, and putting them in touch with each other to try to understand how did they get through that part with the tribe. Because to be honest, they did a good job there, but NEPA was looking, or the Fed side, it appears that they looked a lot more at Western culture versus the Native American to me. And so, but they got the tribe to sign off. So with that said, you know, this may be a possible way to move this project forward. But again, and it keeps bringing up the cost of, you know, okay, we can maybe get CEQA done, but is $3 million, is that something that we want to invest in out there right now? And it kind of makes me want to talk about, you know, and it fits into this subject, I think just fine, is, you know, we obviously know that we want to acquire this land. Part of our problem is we don't have enough land currently, usable land. And so we were looking at a pressurized system to get water into more areas because we didn't own the DWP portion of that discharge area. Once we own it, it changes things a lot. We can go out there and start digging ditches, putting some pipes to maybe gravity water to different points on that land that we've never been able to achieve because we didn't own the land and we weren't allowed to make those improvements. You know, so flood irrigation is still labor intensive, but it's also to get going is a lot cheaper right now. And flood irrigation is a very practical, you know, it's been proven to work for a lot of years. It works all over this valley. So that kind of brings us up that then if we go to that kind of a project, it's a CE and we're just making minor improvements to what we're doing. We're not going to go a full scale construction project out there. And that's where DWP at first led us down that, you know, if we just make those type of improvements, we still have to do the CEQA process, but we have a way out of, we're not doing major excavation in the area. So it's just something I want to bring up is that, you know, we still want the land, but we also have other options of how to get water out there versus, you know, for, you know, tens of thousands and not millions. And I just think I really want to give that a long, hard thought. I'm not saying we have to make that decision today, but it's definitely something that we should consider. At one time, that all of that area was flood irrigated. And, you know, it's just over time, those options have not been maintained. You know, it was a lot easier. And I'll be honest, Jim Tatum, when he was alive, we walked that whole thing because they've had it forever. And he showed me how it was irrigated from the Bishop Creek Canal all the way there through a pipe across the A drain. And there's a lot of irrigation ditches that are out there that just need to be updated, you know, cleaned out and be able to utilize. The city has kind of taken the lead on irrigating a lot of that area. And we just haven't been able to, I didn't feel comfortable just taking it back out there on somebody else's property and restoring ditches. There's also the east side of Airport Road that is all flood irrigatable. You know, it just hasn't been really, you know, utilized, I would say, as good as it could. It's a little sandy, it's a little different. And again, it's labor intensive, but, you know, we could spend a lot of money on labor before we hit $3+ million.
Just one query. The surface water you're referring to would be our effluent then out of the plants?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And one question I have is, I mean, so if I hear what you're saying, it's that we don't necessarily have to go the route of having a full scale irrigation project because $3.1 million, I don't know that we would actually support that at this time. But there are other options like flood irrigation, which are a lot more cost effective. They still require a CEQA and a NEPA to be done, right?
Correct.
And then my only other, so this would still give us more options going down that route. But then my only question is those studies that were done about the nitrogen capture using irrigation, do those studies change based on flood irrigation as opposed to the sprinkler irrigation that we had been talking about?
They're probably not as easily quantified because we don't know exactly the gallons and where exact, you know, we know a sprinkler head, we can put out this much water on this much land. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to matter what's in those monitor wells. You know, if we're not polluting the groundwater, then we've achieved the goal. And I think that we also need to be super honest with ourselves and say that we know a new plant is coming.
Right.
And not tomorrow or anything, but it's going to happen. Our plants are going to wear out, and it's just life. And then at that point, our discharge, our water that we send out is going to be what leaves our plant, not what goes out there anymore. We're going to be regulated by the nitrogen limit that the state puts on us right there. So we're essentially, we could get rid of all of our ponds and just put water straight out in the pasture. We would want to keep those ponds so that we have irrigation storage water. But, it changes the whole game when a new plant comes in. And flood irrigation will work just fine at that point. And again, we know we're talking a $15 to $20 million project.
Right.
We build a new plant, and where does this $3 million fit into that is what always worries me is, we're going to spend that money, and it'll always be a great value to us because then there's just SCADA can manage the system. Nobody's out there doing labor, but it's also $3 million that we barely have, and we won't have for a new plant.
And to be clear, the main reason we went down this path to begin with was we always knew that the irrigation project was a stopgap measure to buy us time to secure funding to get a new plant.
And
It's
also,
always a
the key word is
step.
inexpensive stopgap.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
And the moment it becomes an expensive stopgap measure, then of course we revisit it.
Yes.
But it does seem that, that is a reasonable idea that instead of going to full construction, that we could do selected flood irrigation to achieve that same inexpensive stopgap measure in the short term. But I think with regards to the item in front of us, we still need to do a CEQA and a NEPA, right? So.
But we have to.
We do,
based
but if
on
we
what
go
pick, right?
Mm-mm.
What's
Is
that?
it?
I'm sorry.
Like you do the CEQA and NEPA based on what type of irrigation you pick.
Correct. And then it also, and the NEPA, I guess that we should all remember that was because of the NRCS funds being federal.
Right.
I've talked with Rob, and we can massage this project because they do flood irrigation. They fund that too as well. It might be not as high of dollars. So that's completed. The CEQA, we would be able to go to a categorical exemption and then not have to do all these detailed studies as far as we're doing at this point.
Land is.
It'd be commensurate, yeah. So
Right? Like we're not
because the
gonna-
pipes that we may have to put in, because I'm imagining, you got to get through a sand hill to get water to the other side.
Right,
You
we're
may
not
put
gonna
a
be like
shallow
turning
pipe.
the land.
Yeah,
not gonna be, like,
exactly.
sucking-
The disturbance would be
Yeah.
so much less
Yeah.
that the degree of what they need to look at would drastically change.
Are there
Yeah,
any other types of irrigation that we haven't considered? Are there other options that maybe?
well, there's, they bring up a lot. Have you seen those giant sprinklers that are on like a reel and you pull them out to the end and then they just by water pressure, they wind themselves back up. But when you have cows, those aren't very conducive to having
Oh.
cows around out there.
Right.
The
You know.
topography is rough as a.
And the
cloud.
topography is very rough. And I will say that I honestly think that 3.1 million, which I'm not advocating for that to happen, but I'm talking with the gentleman at Laurel Ag, he's like, the prices are coming back down. So, not as fast as they went up, but resin plants back in Louisiana and stuff are back online, so they're able to produce resin again. And unfortunately, the issue in the LA harbor with getting ships in and out has created, we can't get our pipe out of here now, and stuff. So the demand has gone down. But he told me that he says maybe it would eventually get back to $2 million. That's still not, in my mind, that's not low cost by any means. And maybe, it could be a combination of the two, the very flat ground out there that's already been essentially farmed and maintained for a lot of years, which equates to 40 or 50 acres out there, maybe an irrigation project on that land, and then the rest we deal with. But
And the other reason why, one of the reasons why I wouldn't advocate dropping all irrigation prospects is that that DWP land is going to come with a lot of restrictions. And one of them, and what initiated the transfer, was to build the irrigation project. And they typically have clauses on there that if you're not using it for the purpose that they gave it up for, that they have the first right of refusal to buy it back.
Yeah, hopefully we were basing the sale on the land use and it would be cattle grazing.
Okay.
And that's the basis of the sale, and also driving their into they need to perform CEQA for the sale, go through the CEQA.
Right.
And we're just basing it off of no change in land use.
Okay.
Continue to graze cattle on it. And that's what DWP is basing everything on. So, and I think Todd left us, but I don't want to speak
Fine.
for him, but I believe that is the basis of the sale.
Yeah, should be.
Yeah. And how we irrigate it is because, they're going to sell us that land on the south side of Airport Road, knowing that we're not in need of that land yet and so it's essentially going to just stay just like it is right now.
Okay.
But I think that's a good point you brought up, and we can make sure that isn't part of the deal.
So with going with Team Environmental, we're using them to help us navigate the sprinkler system project. So do we need to decide sooner than later? Are we going to pursue? I mean, it seems like we're spending money
Yeah.
having them help us pursue this project that we might not even pursue.
Correct. And that's why she hasn't even gave us a proposal of what it's going to cost or anything. I think it was mostly I wanted to bring up, it segued into a lot of things right there, as we just did. And I would say that if we choose to go that direction of surface irrigation, then I think we back off of where we're going with this one. I would talk to Robert, and make sure Robert, who's really the lead, we're kind of torn between, is she doing all this, or are we just continue to have her be a sub to Helix Environmental? Because Robert has conducted all the biological side.
Right.
So I think I would feel more comfortable talking to Robert and explaining a different project approach and see what he says on that one. But DWP does it all the time. They expand flood irrigation, they put in ditches, they put in head gates, all the things we're doing, and actually just call it improving the current system and going CE, and they're done. Could save us a lot of heartache in there too. And it might, it's going to
And
change.
it's like environmentally more friendly, like you're using less resources, like you're not using all that energy to,
Yes.
it's a more, it's
Yeah.
less, energy intensive.
Exactly. There's trade-offs both ways. Less energy, more labor. But, I think that we would develop, myself, I would prefer that we get out of the irrigation business, and a lessee would, just like they do at DWP, they would do all the irrigation. It's hard. It's not hard. It's just, we recreate when we have all this property. We have a lease that a lessee knows what they have to do and take care of it.
Yeah, the challenge there, of course, is that if the lessee doesn't live up to their end of the deal, and ultimately the water is, the nitrogen in the water goes up on one of the test wells or whatever, then we're on the hook, not
Exactly.
necessarily the lessee.
Correct.
Yeah, that exactly. And that's why we've been doing it ourselves on our stuff for quite a while. And, it's, to be honest, it's not ideal, but we've been doing it for a long time. And once you make some improvements to things, it's not that big of a deal to go out there. Once you figure out it takes a little bit of time, one summer, as long as you have the right person out there, they figure out how to do it. And then it's just going out in the morning, starting water. You might come back at noon, change it to a different dish. It's not as bad as everybody thinks. At first, it was a lot of work when I did it because we had no idea what we were doing. And absolutely correct, Stephen, is I'm going to go at 5 o'clock, say that water is done. I'm going to go shut it off. Whereas a lessee, he gets sidetracked somewhere else and he goes, I can do it tomorrow because I don't run out of water. When you work at DWP, it doesn't matter. They shut it off when it's time.
And, so if we were to approve this the proposal for the CEQA NEPA investigation or like, yeah, irrigation project, what is the time scale on which that would happen? Like, could we say that we want you to explore flood irrigation as a alternative to the sprinkler irrigation, and then get a sense of how that would change the CEQA and NEPA cost on this item? Or
I think that would be the reasonable approach, that we would then go back to our partners and who's doing this, and, you know, not even them, only them, but Rob Pierce at NRCS. We need to talk with Holly Alpert at the Idiomono Regency of the Irwin. I hate, that's a long one. But talk to Holly, because I've already kind of talked to her about if we change our scope of our project from sprinklers to flood, could it still be applicable for the $500,000 that we asked for? And she said, absolutely. Because there's a lot, you know, they're looking at a project that's more in the scope of what the benefits of doing what you're doing. You know, we're protecting groundwater is really what the idea of them giving us money for. Maybe necessarily how we do it, you know, it might have to give her a new scope and a cost, but I think we could still get money that route.
do we have a sense of how much it would cost to do a flood irrigation project?
Yeah, I got to put some more thought into it, but you know, you're talking some pipe. We definitely want pipe. You know, you're talking. Now we're going maybe $20,000-$30,000 worth of pipe. We're looking at like 24-inch pipe, big pipe. Again, you don't have to get it, which the sale of the land will allow us to have an easement to go under Airport Road, under Cashbaugh Road. So, you know, I'm thinking, be honest, with labor, everything, you know, $60,000-$70,000 maybe at the most.
And we'd be able to use the 500,000 federal money for that?
The NRCS money. Well, they'll rescale the money. They'll go back and say, okay, here's where you're at. And we've talked with Rob, because they're essentially paying for, it's the weirdest thing ever, but pipe by the pound.
Pound?
By the pound, yes. Not by the foot. So where it is.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny, because you really do come up with how much a pound of pipe is. You need to know the feet of pipes. So why aren't, yeah. But we could scale that project around. And, you know, you also, I think we need to remember that DWP, you know, is working with us, and we need to work with them. If they have which they do have their say, they want us to wait until we own the property anyway. Of course. So we got time.
Yeah.
We don't have to rush this and get it done. And I think it's important, you know, throwing this out too, is Walt and I have met with Mike Plasiak once, and hopefully this next month we're going to meet again, you know, and he is being very reasonable and seeing that we are making progress here, that we're working out. And we're also not just making silly decisions and spending taxpayer money for no good reason. And well, that'll get us, when we see him in May, that's one more opportunity to vet through him too. If he's good with that, then I think it was just crazy to just jump over onto any saying, yeah, we're going to put $3 million in here for irrigation with all these unknowns. And I think the biggest one, the unknown number, but the biggest thing we do know is a new plant is going to have to come. And if we spend this could be 400,000 or 4 million. I meant, but irrigation project, CEQA, NEPA, everything that needs to get done. That's our, you know, that's 20% of a new plant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I'd be comfortable with at this point is to give direction to do some preliminary work on the cost difference for a flood irrigation project. Find out if there are any concerns about water contamination with that we haven't thought of. And I mean, since we don't have to do the NEPA and CEQA until we've made the decision of what kind of project we're gonna move forward with, that we just punt on this item. Do we need to do any approval at this point, authorization or no?
I would say no. I would say that hopefully I will be tasked with trying to get all these, as many of these answers as I can solve by July. And then that'll also fit into our budget as well, at our budget hearing that day too. Ed, we might know more about DWP.
Right.
Yeah.
So just thoughts, a lot of good questions and discussion came out of this to give Destin some guidance. And I just have some random thoughts, so I'll just put them out. So sprinkler irrigation was an alternative that was desirable by Lahontan. Mike Plasiak is being patient with us, recognizing that initially, and this was a few years ago, we were talking about a new plant. We were well into the feasibility stage. This community service district was well into the feasibility stage for a new plant. We were keeping Lahontan informed of the progress. Then we shifted gears to the let's call it the enhanced irrigation program, and Lahontan was on board with that. Made a lot of sense to them because it would be an alternative that was much less expensive than the new plant. So now we'll put before Mike Plasiak another alternative. And to you, Mike's position has been, as long as whatever it is we do benefits groundwater quality, he's willing to accept that until a new plant comes on board, which will definitely result in improved effluent water quality, as Destin indicated earlier. With a better technology plant, we'll be able to discharge effluent to the pastures with very low risk to groundwater. So we'll look forward to that day. But in the meantime, we have to balance the efficacy of flood irrigation versus the sprinkler irrigation. And sprinkler irrigation can be a bit more effective, but if once we have the land, if there's some recontouring that can be done, minimal recontouring, improvement of the ditch system, if we can have a better managed flood irrigation system, it'll prevent some of the issues we have now that are probably contributing to impact to groundwater. Does that make sense, Destin? Because
Yes.
you're the irrigation guy.
No, that totally makes sense.
We've had some ponding in certain areas and just topography has been a challenge. So once the land is ours, we can deal with some of that with minimal disturbance. So there's another factor that comes into play too. And this, to me, should be an influence on the value of the land at time of transfer. And that is the current land use, which this board has committed to maintaining current land use, and that is cattle grazing. DWP will retain water rights. Initially in our discussions, there was, I don't know, some of us on this end, we seem to feel that DWP was enabling us to have, once the land became ours, the user of the land would be enabled to access stock water. Well, that isn't the case. So the conundrum now is, if we're going to have cattle grazing, where do they get the water? So without water, to me, that land isn't nearly, it wouldn't have the value as it has today with access to the water for stock. Destin and I have batted this one back and forth when the bad news came to us that we wouldn't have access for stock water. And one option is to tap into the water supply at our plants, the domestic water supply, and have a pipeline go out into the cattle grazing pasture and provide troughs or whatever water system out there so the cattle could have water. But that's an expense to us. There'll be a little bit of disturbance, some minor relatively minor compared to the full irrigation system. There'll be some disturbance, some trenching, but the water can be provided for cattle. So that's a factor that comes into play here too in the whole big picture. It's doable. We haven't put a pencil to the cost of getting water to the cattle.
How do they currently get stock water?
They have access to surface water that's DWP out there. And
The A-drain. There's like what they call a water trap where they just fence it off, the cows can get to it. But to be honest with you, it just crossed my mind, another advantage to flood is then the cattle have water again. Because they choose to drink the way they like that water better than the creek water. It's really weird, but it's pretty clean by the time. So, and something while this came to my mind is you could put in a couple of troughs by Pond 4 out on the fence that came right from Pond 4 that just were on a float and gravity right in there and filled up some giant 1,000-gallon troughs or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, but the flood would also keep water out there for them.
That sounds way better than tapping into the domestic water supply to.
Yeah, because eventually, the water's but it's not horribly expensive, but it also does cost money to produce that water for a cow.
Yeah, for cows. Yeah.
Yeah, a cow might drink 50 to 100 gallons of water a day.
Yeah.
Times 100 of them out there adds up.
No, that's a good consideration.
Yeah, those
to
are
bear in mind.
all considerations as we kind of move forward. And that's why I said I just wanted to get out on the table all the thoughts that are going through my head. And that was a good exercise because Destin came up with a solution to something that we've been talking about with regard to the stock water. By the way, the reason why the cattle are enabled to consume that treated effluent or treated to the level that we treat is that they are non-dairy cattle. If they were dairy cattle, this wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
But they're beef cattle, so it's a different requirement for them. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of other thoughts. I think in general, Destin, did we cover it and give you everything you need to be prepared
so.
for the next board
No,
meeting?
One last little thing I'll add is, at one point in time, we talked to a farmer essentially up in Fallon about leveling our land out there. And he can do a lot of work for $50,000. It was actually amazing what he could do he was talking about leveling our entire 125 acres out there at that time for $100,000, leveling it. And what was the deal breaker is we were leveling for alfalfa. And also, so when you take off the high, fill in the low, you end up with not enough between groundwater and the surface for alfalfa to survive. They need about 8 feet in there of a zone out of the groundwater, or else the plant drowns. But we're not talking about that. And for $50,000, he could do a lot of work out there to make even more of it at a grade that you could flood irrigate too.
But then doesn't that bring you back to the whole archaeological CEQA?
I was going to
Yeah, we're not going to move a lot of land. And, we're talking, moving around dirt like that on the surface. That won't cause that.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, they're more worried about us getting down in 5 and 6 feet, which we would be doing out there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And,
Huh.
and I think we would talk, it's minor surface disturbance is what it's considered.
And that's totally fine when it comes to,
Yeah, we do it right now.
oh, wow, okay.
So, and these are all questions I'm going to ask Robert too, and just make sure. But it's also something that, in the meantime, I can speak with team, and, talk to them. And then, maybe if we go this route too, we can get the tribe on board early, which they prefer to know about. We've learned that they don't like you bringing them plans for a project that are already designed and done and nobody talked to them. You can kind of bring them in early into this process, and they may want somebody out there just to watch the activities and keep an eye on artifacts that might pop up or something, but that's still way more affordable. So I think I have enough direction to bring back something to us in July. And we'll have a meeting with Mike in the meantime. And I just want to remind everybody, I know Walt's going to say, I told you so, but when we started talking about all these irrigation projects and everything else was over 10 years ago. And these plants just went from, 60 years old to 70 years old. And so the idea of building a new plant just becomes more realistic every day. We just know it. And I also don't want to be sitting here talking about this 10 more years. We won't be able to. So
It
I
has
wanted to-
been a journey. It has been, like you say, Destin, 10 years. The journey has been very valuable in that
yes,
it's triggered a lot of thought into other alternatives. And it's enabled us to establish a relationship with Lahontan with respect to what these alternatives are and the benefit to groundwater. So a lot of good things have come up in that time. And the work that was put into the feasibility study isn't wasted. It's on the shelf. And
absolutely.
Loomis Engineering, Jonathan Lesperance, who was with R.O. Anderson at the time, he can carry forward with some of the information that was developed.
Absolutely. And then on top of that is we had, no matter what we do by forming the JPA and combining water, we were going to have to get a Title 22 permit regardless. So yeah, nothing has been wasted, and that's been the good thing. And the other thing is I don't want to, we hope it doesn't happen with inflation and everything the way it's going. Construction will start going down some of that cost a little bit too. Honestly, it just becomes more of a builder's market. Again, right now, if you wanted somebody to build a new plant, they'll tell you, well, I don't have time and it'll cost you a lot of money. Good.
When we were in the feasibility stage, one of the questions we asked R.O. Anderson at that time was their estimate from the point at which we decide and we have the final plans, from the point at which we get moving on the process to the point at which we throw the switch and start the plant, what would their time estimate be? And they said 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
So yeah, exactly. Wow. Now, part of that work has been done in some of the initial feasibility studies. So I would say 5 years is probably a pretty good number. And that's a number that Lahontan will be watching as we move along. They don't want us to keep kicking the can down the road. They have seen enough of that. And we have demonstrated to particularly Mike Plasiak from Lahontan that that's not what we're doing. We're looking at viable alternatives to improving groundwater quality. So he is getting the message through the Lahontan organization that a little bit of patience from their end could get us all in a good place.
Right.
There was another thought I had about plants and moving forward, but the thought comes to me.
Our next item's on plants.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that'll probably trigger the thought because it's starting to come back. It's starting to come out of the. Okay, have we addressed all the issues on
so.
that item?
Destin has direction.
I've learned a lot, so.
Okay, well then we can move forward to the next item. Justin?
So this is kind of pulled out of proposal to somehow to the district, and Jonathan put it in for that, which is fine. He just included them together, being busy. So Jonathan, we need to move forward for multiple reasons of coming up with the plant we need. And we need a feasibility study done to decide, we need to make a decision of what plant we want to build. It also needs to be done. That's one thing that's hanging up, which it isn't the world, but it's getting the money from the state for design of a new plant, the $500,000. They need this feasibility study as part of the requirements to get that money. As Walt said earlier, Jonathan's done one already. So it should be able, he did multiple plants. I think that we want to direct him to go to our top 3 choices and revisit those 3 choices and see which one. Because there was at a point in time when different people are at the table, there wasn't a clear decision on which plant should be built. So I think there's a number of reasons that you need to look at them. Some are more energy hogs, they maybe they'll all get you to the same point, but which one is the most efficient way to do it and will work best in our environment, all that take consideration. So that's what Jonathan has proposed here, and we're just waiting for him to put a price tag on that proposal to do it. It seems 25,000 is a lot of money, but it seems like that's what it costs anymore to do all this stuff. Hopefully it'll be less than that, but I put that in that budget as a placeholder because that's similar to the numbers that it was last time to do it, which was a lot more extensive because he was looking at like 15 different kinds of plants. We got to limit it down to what we think we need to do, but Jonathan can pull this all together and get us a proposal, and I could share it with everybody before I sign it. Just email it over and make sure it looks good. But he does excellent work, and he's on top of this. There was a little webinar thing about improved oxidation dishes, which was the choice the last time. But because for lack of better words, they're energy hogs, and they have new technology that has made them much more efficient.
Really?
That just coming out right now. So Jonathan went to that webinar. Exactly. So, and solar will help a lot if we can add solar to that, and just deciding realistically, we need to look at numbers again. We picked the total flow, but is that number the right total flow? You hate to build something for 2.9 million gallons, and be honest, it's never going to get there. So why do you build it that big? So we need to find all that out again. And also, I need to interject it somewhere. The tribe, like our last meeting, you guys said, go ahead and start talking to the tribe and seeing where they want to be part of this. No answer. Nobody, Peter Bernasconi just literally dropped off the map. And now Walt pointed out the other day, and I looked, they're advertising for a new public works director. There's, this is all just rumors. We've heard that they were going to build their own plant. That definitely is a game changer on this thing.
Oh, yes.
A big job, it'd take away, I don't know what the flow is from the tribe, but it's probably 400,000 or not 400, 250-ish or something, Steve.
Less than that.
About a third of our plant. Typically, before we started having meter issues, they were around 130.
Okay, I'm sorry, I way over guessed that one, but they're also growing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then they do have.
I mean, 70 years ago, the Community Services District and the City of Bishop built their own plant like 100 yards from each other. And now we're finally on the same page, and we're potentially going to deal with the same thing.
Yeah, and a new plant that would be on tribal lands. And I don't know who's going to be making those decisions, how true they are. It's just awful interesting that they just kind of fell off the map and no talking. I think they used to come to the district board meetings all the time.
They were Peter Bernasconi participated in our board meetings. He was almost like an extra board member. His
Was a good man to have there.
Yeah, and we had that two-way flow of communication between the tribe, their needs and so forth. But they've gone dark. He hasn't answered texts, phone calls, emails.
And granted, he's leaving. He's retiring finally. So maybe, but I think just to be on the safe, I think that's enough conversation about it because we don't need to start a problem. I need to try to work with that tribe and try to figure out how to work together. But
Yeah,
it's just
the last thing we need we're replacing 2 plants with one, and then another one pops up.
yeah.
That is the definition of not having economies of scale and wasting public funds.
No, and I don't by no means would ever say that they will fail, but Steve Harris, our pond guy, spends 90% of his life helping the Native Americans bring their ponds and stuff back online because they build a new plant like this. They, one, cannot find the people to operate it. Two, they cost so much that they can't afford to run it. And then they're back trying to go back to what they used to do. So I'd love to work with them and even get Steve involved and help, not tell them why they can't do it, but why we should work together.
Yeah. I mean, our valley is, we're always talking about diversifying and consolidating certain things. Our valley, that's just a reality of the limits of the people here.
A number of years ago, the tribe, when they weren't paying their bill to the district for over a year, $250,000 in arrears, they approached IHS, Indian Health Services, and they about a new plant then. And the conclusion was drawn that the economics and the moving not only initial capital, but the O&M and everything Destin just touched on just wasn't reality. Also, it took up a chunk of their real estate that could be used for other purposes. So you look at everything from a common sense standpoint, either EPA or IHS is going to say, it's a whole bunch better if you just collaborate with the city of Bishop and the sewer district and have them deal with this. And it truly is. The numbers are just real easy to figure out. So that, as Destin said, that's a trail we don't need to go down at this point.
Yeah.
If it becomes a serious matter, it substantially influences the type of technology you'd use for treatment, because the flow rates could drive you from one option to another quite easily.
And so when we're talking for this point about confirming the design and the future flow rates, are we just coming up with estimates for different scenarios? Is that what
Correct. Yeah. And yes. So when we talk about flow rate and all that stuff, it drives what type of plant you really need to have.
So would, as part of the feasibility study, could we give ranges for the flow rates? Like, okay, City of Bishop, we're gonna predict, 2% population growth for over a 5-year period, and then the district this much population, and then have different ranges for 2%, 5% population growth.
Yep, and that 2% was the number that actually got used 10 years ago by it has stayed pretty. I don't know if that we've even got there, but
no, the city of Bishop has been completely landlocked, but of course we've been chipping away at acquiring land, doing infill and rezoning to be more friendly to further housing. So if all of those things end up happening and we end up infilling City of Bishop, we could easily be talking about over the next 20, 25 years having 15% population growth in the city. That would be the upper limit.
Yeah, total at the end of those years, right?
Yeah.
And I think a couple of the projects could happen in the next 5 years or less, I hope.
Right.
Infill with city property.
So then would another one of the considerations be okay, what is the flow rate? Would we want to add flow rate with or without the tribe, or are we just going to go under the assumption that the tribe is continuing with the community services district?
For now, we'd go under that assumption that they will continue. They've given no information. Of course, they're not communicating with us, but at this point, I think it's wise to say that we'll continue to treat their flows. Now, when we started our feasibility study, we did meet with IHS, and their engineers predicted a growth on the reservation of 2% per year. And that was over a 50-year period, because it's at the build out of the plant. You have a plant that's going to last 75 to 100 years. What's your growth and flows?
Yeah.
So that's what IHS, and we may even have documents on that. But in any case, it's a number that we have used.
That seems unreasonable.
What, the
2% growth over 50 years, that's like population going up by a factor of 2.7.
Yeah, it's about right, because, you look at the growth they've had in the last 5 years of hotels, casinos, additions in residential units, and they have definitely exceeded that 2% in the last few years. So averaged over a long period of time, that's a number that made sense. And it is within the communication we got from the tribe at that point was it is their objective to grow and provide more housing and more opportunity on the reservation. So they have the land and they're not landlocked like the city and the district. So
They are definitely, it's driven and changed projects for the last 10 years. Is there potential of 200 to 400 homes, housing tract just behind the school? And the IHS has stopped it from happening because of the sewer issue. There's no capacity left for them at their plant.
correct.
So as soon as that happens, that's, I think, taken consideration is that growth right there. And I think at this point, I'm going to try to get on and talk to the tribal council, go to one of their meetings, be on the agenda, and just, and not trying to ask them, what are you doing? Say, this is what we are doing, and how does that work for all of us?
I guess the one reason why I would advocate to maybe including that as a parameter on one of the ranges of the flow rates is because if we have a look at, all right, here are the estimates for with the tribe and without the tribe, and it turns out that without the tribe, we would be fine with a plant that is going to be $5 million cheaper than with, then that gives us some leverage to be like, commit.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think in that?
That makes
it's a
sense.
feasibility study.
But if there were any kind of an agreement like that, I don't know how binding that is. you
True.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we should operate under the assumption that they're going to do what they've always done. And they're not going to build their own. I just,
For now, that's
yeah.
Sure.
That's, yeah, I would agree. That's the best information we
Yeah.
have.
But knowing that we know exactly, pretty much exactly what the flows are at the tribe, it's an easy little drill for Jonathan just to say, well, is that even make a difference on the plant that you built?
Right.
The
Right.
type of plant.
It might not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might not.
It might
Yeah,
not.
it may make no difference because we're definitely not going to build a plant that's just big enough to cover what we have. It's going to be bigger than, a little larger than we need.
Okay.
At this time. Okay, I think I can pass that on to Jonathan then.
And then the other style and type of treatment of plant. I don't feel like I'm qualified to make any sort of a decision on a type of water effluent treatment plant, especially when I don't know what options are out there. So
He is really good though. All
right.
At the point,
Yeah,
he will
he'll
come
present
back.
those.
We'll
that's why
invite
we
him.
hire.
We'll
people
invite
who are
him to the
experts.
meeting and he'll give us 3 options and he will tell you in terms, John's good at saying, breaking it down to our terms. Well, none of us are experts. We don't operate one.
Right.
We hear about them. We know enough about them to be dangerous, but that's why we're paying him to tell us what we need to have.
Jonathan is one of those rare engineers. He's not only good with numbers, but he's good with words. So he can explain things in layman's terms pretty well. He's a pleasure to work with. Couple thoughts, Destin. My last conversation with Jonathan, I didn't mean to sidetrack or get in the middle of anything with regard to a request for a proposal or estimate or anything, but one of the thoughts I had was that if on the first pass, he could kind of take the 30,000-foot view and look at the big picture of things, and from that perspective, come up with alternatives. Is that where you're headed and what you expect on his first pass?
Yeah, absolutely. Did kind of rule out nothing and just in general, he knows pretty much everything about us.
Yep.
And then go and say, look at, and I don't want him spending a bunch of money and time looking at 20 plants.
Right.
I truly believe that he got this narrowed down to 3. We have not changed in any way in 10 years.
Right.
So just go to those 3 and say, do those still make sense?
Yes.
And if they make sense, then let's just focus right there and
Exactly.
cut out, because that's hours and hours of time if he's looking at multiple, 10s and 20 different kinds of plants.
Right. Right.
So that's exactly how I want him to go about that.
Right.
And I will direct him that way.
A couple other items that come into how we move forward. Currently, and I don't know the details, there is federal, and Destin, you're more up on this than I am, but there's federal and state funding available for infrastructure related to water projects, correct?
Yes.
So this is a good time to get in front of those people who have the funds, the grant funds to dole out. And this is where Mike Plasiak wants to help us if he can.
Mhm.
But he needs to know what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, in order to help guide us to where the funding may come from. So the closer we are to shovel ready, whether it's an irrigation project in the pasture or whether it's looking at a plant, the closer we are to being shovel ready, the better chance we'll have to pull in some funding for these substantial projects. So coming back to the pasture irrigation, for example, if we determine that, there is some reason to consider the water cannon approach. And if we're that close to it, and we already have design drawings for a layout, who knows if there was funding available, would that change our perspective on whether we would want to go there or flood irrigation?
Absolutely.
So those,
Yeah.
there's a lot of horses and carts and chickens and eggs running around now. We don't have the answers because we would like to have part of the puzzle in place in order to understand, how that drives our other alternatives, funding wise, cost wise, also the efficacy of, is there an advantage to going with one or the other? So
Yeah, and that's getting this feasibility study done. Well, I already have, actually been assigned I don't know what you want to call him, a grant administrator or whatever from the state DWR on this design. You're just waiting for the feasibility. I need the documents to back it up now. They've got past the first phase. So once we get this, then this will get us pretty much there that they can give us the funding to design $500,000 to design the plan. That would cover it.
right. So there is funding available for the design process, correct?
There's the design, the construction funding's out there, which it's not just driven by this last bill and stuff that's gone through. This is always out there with DWR, and up to 6 million. The city would be could apply for up to 6 million to build, but we also need to have it designed.
Right.
We can't apply. I tried to apply for all of them. Why not? All they could do is say no, right? And they said, well, when you got a design ready, then come back and talk to us. But we definitely are a disadvantaged community that has a great opportunity to get that $6 million. It would go a long ways.
Talking about disadvantaged communities, the district tried to, we did a study to determine if we could qualify in that area, and we could not. And Jen, this is where I might need you to jump in, but so if I say something that's off track, let me know. But because the district couldn't qualify for the disadvantaged economic community, that was before the joint powers was formed. So the question before me at this time is, now that the district is part of BAWA, does the qualification shift? The city qualifies, the district didn't. but together, do we qualify for disadvantaged community?
So as I started filling these out, they said to do it as a city of Bishop. Push the
Okay.
projects through as a city of Bishop, because it would change the dynamics. See, the greater population or Bishop, your service district is bigger than our city. It would definitely affect, it would probably take away our disadvantaged business or our disadvantaged community from us. Because a project-wide basis, you can do projects that only, would enhance something in a disadvantaged block, census block. But then like our Spruce Hamby project was in a disadvantaged census block. So we were able to take advantage of it. I think the way I'm understanding is from the state talking DWR, we go together as one, we'll just lose it completely because the average will just go up that much more when you put everybody together, what our median household income is for
Even with the tribe added into the.
Well, we can't add the
Yeah.
tribe.
Yeah, the tribe.
You guys are really at a downfall if
That's
you
right.
could get Highlands Mobile Home, Glenwood, and the tribe to count individually versus being a block. You would be easy in there, but you can't, they won't count it that way.
And
They're a single customer. And you know what I mean?
Yep.
And
I forgot.
so Destin, does that also play into the plant location? Which is one of the
Oh,
things that I
I
think
don't
needs
have
to be
trouble.
clarified in the study. Or that they're asking for clarification.
Yeah, where.
Location is, it's at the very bottom of the page, right? Joint
Of
treatment
the-
feasibility study cited the plant in the city's Pond One footprint. The ECSD plant expansion project cited the plant on ECSD property north of its aerated lagoon. So does that mean that the joint one should be technically in like current city of Bishop land to be able to not give any gray area for funding avenues?
That's a good question that I need to find out. Yeah, at this time, that, the question kind of was just where's the right ground to be, and location and that. And there was a spot over there on their side, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be there. So you're right. I don't know if that would affect it. If
I mean,
it
I don't
was
care
not
where it
on
is.
our
I just
land.
want to make sure
Yeah,
that
that we get
that we
qualified.
can get, that
Yeah.
we could, that we remove any doubt that we can qualify for all
Yeah.
of the funding.
No, it totally makes sense. Yeah, you'd hate to go down the path and then find out, oh, since it's over there, you don't get any money.
Right.
That is. Catch 22. Good point.
So were there other items on here that you needed clarification from us, or?
I don't think so. I think Jonathan and I kind of came up with that list a while back, and I just wanted to point out that was going to be all the stuff that will be in his proposal.
I see. And so
Did it-
you'll clarify all of these points and get back to Lumos and
Yes.
If there was like a new technology, we're not going to tell Jonathan not to look at it. I mean, I know you had mentioned that just stick with like the three that
No.
he had been, but
Yeah, unless there's something
there's,
new
yeah,
that's
you just don't want him to
changed.
look at every single type of water treatment plant. I just feel
Yeah.
like in 10 years, the technology could have likely changed somewhat and there
Well,
could
there
be
is some new technology.
more
Some,
efficient ones. So I wouldn't want to like pigeonhole ourselves into what he's always been looking at.
exactly.
Okay,
I would say those three plus anything that's new since we last look at
okay,
it.
okay.
Because we did a little pilot project at the plant on some new technology for nitrogen removal, and that's new, but it's super, super expensive.
Sure,
So, that we could tell, I can tell them, no, that one don't even look at because we've already,
tested it.
we did, it was amazing what it did. But it's just, you got to heat up all the water. The water has to be, because nitrogen removal can't happen in less than 40 degrees. It was essentially a sewer pond goes almost dormant at below 40. So the idea is, it was not so mechanical, but it was a huge amount of money to keep the water, keep your water
Right,
temperature up
so that's
where
really inefficient.
where you can have nitrogen removal happening, denitrification and all that.
Okay,
It was really cool technology and it worked. It was taking ours down to less than 1 total nitrogen.
Hey,
But as you can tell, The lower you at, once your nitrogen limit, the more money the plant costs.
So, I mean, in the interest of getting this going along, getting the project shovel ready, especially like since we ultimately know that we're going to be going a plant route. I'm comfortable making a motion to authorize the administrator to execute the contract once it's provided by Lumos.
Without a cost,
Well, that, I was just gonna
Oh,
add,
return.
would you like to add a number that I could be authorized to? And if it's more, then we'll talk about it.
maybe a not to exceed figure.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think a number is, Dustin?
So, I mean, I put 25,000 in the budget. That felt,
Sure. Not to
So,
exceed
ma-
25,000.
I'll second.
yeah.
There's a motion and a second. Would you like to poll the board, Michelle?
Any public comment?
Oh, thank you. Comments before we take a vote.
I don't see any comments.
We're ready to poll the board.
Board Member Schwartz,
Yes.
Board Member Stone,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Yes.
Chairman Pachuki,
Yes,
motion approved.
thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 7, staff and board reports.
Oh, you got so much covered right there that it was covered, it kind of went everywhere. So I have nothing further.
Steve Nixon, do you have anything? All right. Board members,
Only comment I have is I have to leave shortly.
and we're there.
I
Ron.
know,
We're
I'm
there.
just being
Um,
facetious.
I have nothing.
But that's all right.
And Michelle, is there anything?
I have nothing. Thank you.
All right. We also have Jen and Ward on. Any comments from you before we adjourn?
No comment.
I have no
No
comment
comments
either.
from Jen
Beg pardon?
nor Ward.
Great meeting.
Then we can adjourn.
Well, and I've got to get my shoes up.
And the time is about 9:37 or thereabouts. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Fishberry Wastewater Authority is July 19th, 2022 at 8 o'clock in Bishop City Council Chambers.
Thank you.
No need for a special meeting, sounds like.
Hopefully not. Thank you all very much for
Thank
your
you.
time this morning.
Hey.
Thank you.
We covered a lot of